Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to our movement, our music, our stories, the 10th anniversary of the Black August Hip Hop Project documentary screening, this virtual screening and talk with Monifa Bandele. I'm your host, Desire Thompson, and this event was created by the amazing people at the Caribbean Cultural Center of the African Diaspora Institute, an arts, culture, education, and media organization that advances cultural equity and equality and racial and social justice for African descendant communities. So yesterday was a pretty big deal for Black August as it marked the 10-year anniversary of the Black August Hip Hop Project documentary by filmmaker Dream Hampton, who will also be joining us in a little bit. So tonight we're going to be highlighting and discussing some of our favorite clips and moments from the documentary. I honestly wish that we could play the whole thing because it's such a rich and filling story to people who are especially are lovers of hip hop and of social justice. So some housekeeping notes. We're going to be streaming this live on YouTube and Facebook. So hello. Please feel free to drop your comments and your questions throughout the discussion, throughout the talk back, and we'll definitely be getting to them at the end. So I will be introducing our wonderful guest, Monifa Bandele, who has had an extensive career in social justice. She's the co-founder and coordinator 10 years for the Black August Hip Hop Project. She's also the senior vice president for momsrising.org, an on-the-ground and online grassroots organization of more than 1 million people who are working to achieve economic security for all mothers, women, and families in the United States. And there, she leads amazing work on maternal and children's health, successfully winning policies at the federal and state levels that reduce infant and maternal mortality. She's also on the leadership team for the policy table for the movement of Black Lives. Additionally, she's on the steering committee for the New York-based communities United for Police Reform, representing the Malcolm X grassroots movement, which is also a member organization for the movement for Black Lives. Just in the past 10 years, she's led the launch of 2 historic and successful legal cases against police misconduct in New York City and New York State, and worked to pass landmark police reform. And she is also a contributing writer to the Movement for Black Lives vision for Black Lives. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to our virtual stage, Monifa Bandele.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm happy to be here with you. I was so quiet earlier because I'm just like, I need to make sure that I get this amazing resume down packed because you are such an amazing person.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Black August to you.
Of course, yes. Happy Black August. And I'll admit, this year was the first time that I've watched the documentary. And I've heard of Black August before, but I wasn't very well versed in it. And it was so amazing to kind of just like see your like tenacity and your passion throughout the documentary, and this beautiful intersection of like music and activism and social justice. And you know, with yesterday being the 10th year anniversary of the documentary, Billboard also reported that the event is still going strong. Sunday, there's going to be a virtual benefit concert with some of the, I guess, Black August alumni, I would call, like, so M1 of Zed Prez, Yasin Bey, also known as Mos Def, along with some new faces, new to the world, I guess, like that bubble. So Grammy nominated artist Rhapsody, one of my personal faves, Big Crit, and so much more. So I'm looking forward to Sunday, and I'm also looking forward to this. So tell me a little bit about how you all were approached with the idea of the documentary, and what was that process like for you?
So we have been documenting the Hip Hop Project since the very first year that we did it. In fact, the inspiration for it, which will come out when we show some of the clips, was when we traveled to Cuba for the World Youth Festival in the late 90s, and we were really impressed and inspired by the activists and the political exiles there. And like you said, we were lovers of hip hop. We were encouraged to use our culture as young people at the time to
Mhm.
uplift and raise awareness around political prisoners. And we were also just learning about Black August. And so we came together, and actually it was Lumumba within our committee that said, hey, let's bring these two things together. Let's have our way of celebrating Black August be using our culture of hip hop and profiling the political prisoners who we're fighting to free.
Yeah, and we see that absolutely as soon as the doc starts off, and the clip that I'm about to share. And I think I picked this one first just because if you aren't familiar, or if you're somebody that is a part of the past couple years of, I don't know, I don't want to say you just became woke, but it's almost like you just became woke, and you're not familiar with a lot of the history. This is an amazing clip to start off. So this is a clip highlighting political prisoners.
And through talking about the Black August tradition and her really explaining to us how powerful hip hop was, not just for us in the United States, but globally, we decided that we were going to use that medium to highlight her comrades, those who were still in the prisons for doing the same type of work that she's doing, and those who are in prison for helping to free her from prison. The people who we focus on in Black August are people like Sundiata Kohli, her co-defendant, Sekou Odinga and Mutulu Shakur, who are in prison for the liberation of Assata Shakur, and who are also Nahanda Abiodun's co-defendants. We work around Mumina. We help to raise awareness around Abdul Majid and Bashir Hamid. And we do support work for political prisoners in the South, like at the Angola 3, and in the West Coast, like Rochelle McGee and Hugo Purnell. Sekou Odinga is a former Black Panther and Black Liberation Army member for the Republic of New Africa. He began struggling for Black people back in the 60s and did a lot of things. You know, he helped to create free breakfast programs. He did a lot of organizing against police brutality. And the Black Panther Party was attacked by the federal government and by local police through COINTELPRO. He and others were forced to go underground and form the Black Liberation Army. And the Black Liberation Army was basically in place to protect themselves. You know, they were being attacked by the state, and to protect the community because the community was being attacked by the state. Sekou Odinga was implicated in the liberation of Assata Shakur and therefore became a target of the government and of the police. When he was being tracked down by the police, they tried to kill him the same way they tried to kill Fred Hampton Sr. and attempted to kill Geronimo Jijaga Pratt. Sekou Odinga was able to ward off that attempt, but he was captured, and he's been in prison ever since.
One of the cases that we worked on and we continue to work on is the case of the Queens Two, Abdul Majid and Bashir Hamid. Abdul Majid is a Queens native, longtime grassroots organizer and activist, spent a significant amount of time working with the Grassroots Advisory Council, doing other anti-poverty programs. This is before his joining the Black Panther Party.
Herman Bell is an amazing activist. All of his life, he's participated in community projects that help benefit everyday people. Even while in prison, he continues to develop and implement projects that are really critical to our existence. Herman Bell is the architect of a program called Victory Gardens, where they grow organic food in Maine. And those farmers cultivate that food year in and year out and send it down to communities like the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Newark, so that everyday people are exposed to organic food. And this began at a time when nobody knew what organic was. You know, this is in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And so when we look at Herman's resume from behind the walls, it's hard to even imagine all the stuff that he did before then. And as a leader in the Black Panther Party, he helps develop the chapter, helped to recruit people, helped to train organizers. And so all around, incarcerated and before incarcerated, he's made a tremendous impact on our community. And likewise, Jalil Muntakeen has also earned a bachelor's degree while in prison. Jalil Muntakeen is a published author and poet. He lectures and gives lots of advice to us as activists going on. Jalil is really a fiery person. When you meet him even today, it's almost like you see that same 19-year-old kid that was arrested back in the 1970s. The third co-defendant in the New York 3 is Noah Washington. Noah Washington is a poet and an author. And his passing in April of 2000 helps us to understand how time is really of the essence in freeing our political prisoners. Because even though we're doing all that we can do at this point, as the years go on, the number of political prisoners decreases, not because they're getting out of prison, but because they're passing away.
And I really thought that clip was so important, especially the last part where you talked about how, we're not losing them because they're getting out, it's because they're passing away. And it led me to think about Jaleel Muskim, because he was diagnosed with COVID. And there was an op-ed that came out in June that, had called for his release, in addition to him having, I want to say, like, the judge already mandated his release or something like that. Yeah. So I wanted to know, when you think about today's world, especially with our and dealing with another monster that is COVID, how do you think this kind of all intersects today?
Yeah, one of the things that's happened with COVID is it's really laid bare all of the structural injustices. People are able to see the health inequities. People are able to see how little empathy and care there are for people who are incarcerated. We're in a quote unquote liberal state in New York, and yet the governor refuses to release elderly, people who are health compromised, people who are like no threat to the communities that they would go back to, but they keep them in prison. And so COVID has really highlighted a lot of the contradictions in a way that those political prisoners saw from themselves in the 60s and 70s. And I want to point out one thing, though. I said in the end, one of the things is that people aren't getting out, they're passing away. But since that clip, 3 of the men named, we have been able to free them from prison. So Sekou Odinga is free from prison.
I remember it.
Is free from prison. We mentioned Mumia, but also we didn't talk about the MOVE prisoners. And so 3 of them have also since been released. So we're on a roll. We're fighting and we're leaning in.
And I love that. I love it. That's so amazing. And I live here in Brooklyn. I'm originally from the Bronx, but I live here in Brooklyn. And I walk around and I see like these community gardens, and I see all these, I guess, like remnants of what our heroes were doing so many years ago, and how they really laid out the blueprint for today's activists, today's leaders, today's heroes in a way. Why do you think that today's heroes or today's leaders should lend their voices to political prisoners?
One is because the same playbook is being used on today's activists. So history is repeating itself. We just saw 2 weeks ago an organizer from Warriors in the Garden, which was one of the organizations that the Occupy City Hall, demanding that NYPD's budget be cut by $1 billion. Weeks after the occupation was over, police have been targeting and arresting members of those protesters from that occupation. And so you kind of see the same thing rolling out. They went to his home. They had helicopters and drones. This was for someone who was doing a peaceful protest, a sit-in at City Hall. So we don't study COINTELPRO and what it did to the activists of the 60s and 70s. We will fall victim. And then the second thing is because we owe them. We owe them so much. When you walk down the streets and you see the gardens, the first food co-ops in New York, in Brooklyn, people don't know about this, was through Black activists at the East. So much happened in the 60s and 70s that we benefit from, and they made a whole bunch of sacrifices. And so we can't move forward unless we make sure we free our political prisoners.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I'm ready for that. I'm ready to hear more young people and more artists talk about political prisoners, because I feel like we don't really have that right now. I think today's artists have done like a lot of artists that you don't think about, say like a Roddy Ricch, or say a lot of like the younger people. They have spoken up on behalf of Black Lives Matter, which is amazing. And I think it would be great for the next step to be, okay, like, let's, drop these, share with your fans, like, who these people are. Like, I remember one of the clips, I think we're going to see a little bit later, it was Smith & Wesson, and they had, let me say his name wrong, Mumia?
Mumia.
Yeah, Mumia. They had like it was in the song. So even if you're just listening and you're like, oh wait, like who is that? I should look it up. Like let's see what Genius is gonna say about it. So I think that a lot of artists today can definitely learn from this amazing project and from our political prisoners.
Some people learned about Asada through Common Song, and before that, people learned about Asada because Public Enemy had a song where they said Chesimard, and people were like, "Who's Joanne Chesimard?" You know, they just shouted her out in the middle of a hip hop song. And that's how, like, for our generation, we found out about Asada.
See, and I think it was Rhapsody as well as there's a Chicago artist, Jamila Woods, I want to say. They both ironically released albums. One was called Woman, one was called Eve, and each song was the name of an amazing Black woman, whether it was a revolutionary, whether it was Oprah, whether it was Aaliyah or Queen Latifah. Like it was very great to see women in hip hop do that. So I'm ready for these men to take some notes, man. Take some notes. But yeah, so you can go ahead and introduce the second clip that we're gonna watch.
Yeah, so go ahead and throw on my clip that I want to talk about next.
Mm-hmm.
You have it ready?
In 1968, there were scores of rebellions across the country. Black people rebelling against white supremacy and racism and poverty. The United States was heavily involved in a war in Southeast Asia that it was losing. To the ruling elite and to the ruling class of that time, it appeared as though the system was coming apart.
Which meant that the movement against United States imperialism felt empowered from outside. And that meant that there was a lot of turmoil. There was tremendous numbers of arrests and trials, and there was an effort on the part of the intelligence services and law enforcement to crush and eliminate all these movements.
The government systematically attacked that movement. They killed our most articulate, most committed leaders like Malcolm X, leaders like Fred Hampton. They deliberately assassinated them. And using the FBI's COINTELPRO program, the FBI, in conjunction with the local police, waged an attack on every single activist organization in the United States, specifically targeting the Black Liberation Movement. And within that targeting, targeted the Black Panther Party as the most dangerous organization and targeted its members for assassination, charged people with every kind of false charge that was conceivable.
There is no officially recognized political prisoner in the United States. People who are recognized in other countries as political prisoners, people who are recognized by revolutionary movements as political prisoners, people who are identified as political prisoners by the groups that they were part of, are considered in the United States law criminals.
The reason why we look at former members of, say, AIM or the Black Panther Party as political prisoners is because their incarceration is not due really to a violation of any law, but to a commitment by the state to make them appear like criminals and to delegitimize the organizations and the movements themselves.
It was a time that's almost impossible for young people now to imagine that level of resistance, that level of confidence, and the level of expecting that revolutionary action was going to be successful. The young people who formed Malcolm X Grassroots, they didn't have that opportunity. They couldn't have that participation. So the fact that they are able to gain a consciousness and implement it and make people aware, and just use this name, Black August, for concerts. You know, people say, well, what's that? And then you have to explain about the prisoners and about what happened. And it's very imaginative. And it's also engaged in what we called at the time international solidarity.
How's Cape Town doing tonight? So Black August in the United States again is a month of resistance where many people celebrate resistance movements, Marcus Garvey's birthday, the Haitian Revolution, the Nat Turner Rebellion. So the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, which is a national organization that believes in self-determination, decided to take on this name and carry the tradition of resistance. And unknown to many people in the United States, there are political prisoners.
This is the freedom fighter portion of our program. We talked about earlier that Black August represents people who were members of the Black Panther Party, members of the Black Liberation Army, members of the Republic of New Africa. Give it up for your elders, y'all. Make some noise.
It's about that time to load up the 9 and do my daily crime. My warriors, younger brother man before ya. Mr. Ripper, aka the enemy killer. My man with the weed. That's not for speed. Free move me up, 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 free move me up.
Amazing. So before we dive into that second clip, which has a little bit of everything, we are going to bring filmmaker, one of my favorite writers, and organizer from Detroit, Dream Hampton, to the stage, to the virtual stage. Clap, clap, clap.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm double tasking. Let me stop.
Oh, no,
I'm
totally
in post-production on a project. But
wow.
hi, Monifa. Those were some memories. Looking back at some of those clips, I haven't watched Black August in so long.
Yeah, it's such a great doc to look at, especially when you think of all the amazing work that you've done. And I like the raw look of it all. I think that it's so cool. I love that it's such a full. I was telling Monifa it's such a full documentary. You hit every mark, which I love. So what I wanted to know from you was what was your first experience? Of course, what was your first experience with Black August, and what led you to want to highlight the Black August benefit with the documentary?
Yeah, well, I'm a founding member of the New York chapter of the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. So I was one of the people producing the concert for 12 years as a member of the organization. And the reason why you see some of the footage that looks super raw is because there were so many filmmakers shooting over those years with different equipment. Martha Diaz, for instance, gets a co-director credit. She shot a lot of the, hey, Monifa, I was just talking about Martha Diaz and how she shot a lot of the footage in South Africa. I mean, I can think of some of the qualities of the cameras that we had, but a lot of the editing process for this project was collecting that footage. But yeah, like Monifa, I was, one of there were 4 or 5 of us that started the New York chapter of Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. And when we got the, word that the kind of, first of all, the education around what Black August was, about the history of Qatari Golden and George Jackson and San Quentin and what this had become throughout the prison system. And then we're asked, by people like Asada and Nahanda to, raise awareness about political prisoners, that there was a current issue that we could organize and run campaigns around, defense campaigns, and also to run, to raise money for those campaigns using hip hop concerts. Then we just took it on. None of us were concert promoters or producers. Lumumba Bandele, of course, had a little more experience. He had been organizing for y'all for the Caribbean Cultural Center. He had been doing, the Lincoln. Lumumba had a experience doing the Caribbean Cultural Center, Lincoln Center events. but none of us had experience as like concert producers. So even the idea of like documenting our work wasn't something we were doing really hardcore. We knew that when we went, the 2 times that we shot Asada in Cuba, we knew that it was important to document that. You know, I'm so happy that we have Nahando on camera, for instance. We just knew how historic, I think even then, the Cuba trips were. The South Africa trip, I'm so happy Martha Diaz was there. And again, props to Martha. She's a co-director on Black August, because she captured some really incredible footage. We were so busy trying to hold all the pieces. We had never done a show that ambitious before, because we were in Durban for the World Conference Against Racism. And then we went to Joburg and did another concert in a train station. And then we went to Soweto and did like a kind of improvisational stuff, all things that you see in the film. And so you'll see that I'm not filming that. In fact, you'll see me standing behind the folks on the panel in Durban. I don't know if you can tell that was me,
I saw, yeah. That was a very interesting part of the documentary.
You know, I mean, I know that you talked about liking me as a writer, and when I was in film school at NYU, I used to write some, but I spent a lot more time, you know, organizing than I did writing. I would write 4 or 5 times a year. There are people who really wrote a lot. My friend Karen Good, Karen May, you know, people who wrote all the time and are really dope at it. I kind of dipped in and out, but outside of school, MXGM was like a big part of the 90s for me.
I love that. And this is a question that I have for both of y'all, you know, being there and being so ambitious and just like making sure that the show is running. What were some of the lessons that, that you've kind of taken with you over the years from those early days of doing the shows?
Did Monifa tell y'all that she passed out, that she fainted on the airport?
Oh no!
I was pregnant on the way to the South Africa trip.
Oh wow!
And so en route to leaving New York, I woke up in the ER because I fainted. So yeah, definitely, we didn't know about, as activists, we didn't know about self-care in 2001. It wasn't a thing. Self-care wasn't a thing. We also didn't know that we couldn't do anything. Like how Dream just described, we're going to fly to South Africa. We're going to put on 4 concerts. We're going to bring in art. But it never dawned on us that it was something that we couldn't do. So that's how we used to roll in 2001, right?
That's so true. But we didn't make a lot of money. Like I think about it now, and concerts just aren't the best way to raise money. Like we also didn't have, I still believe in boycotting GoFundMe, because they gave Darren Wilson, Mike Brown's killer, a big 6-figure check, but we did not have online fundraising platforms. I think that how much more efficient maybe that would have been because the purpose of these concerts ultimately was to raise, first of all, to raise awareness, but the other part was to raise money for these defense campaigns. And we just, whatever we contributed ended up being a small part of that, like concert. And I'm not saying all the artists dedicated their time and donated their time, but it was always such an expensive endeavor. But I think that the idea that culture, you know, you think about seeds that get planted right now on the streets, there's a call to defund the police, right? And that is primarily an abolitionist call. And I think about 1996 when Critical Resistance, when Kathy Cohen and Rosa and Angela Davis first began Critical Resistance and started giving us this modern day framework for abolition. And here it is, you know, almost 30 years later, that you see the seeds of that work, you know, kind of, so to see people talking about, I'm not saying that our work is the reason people are talking about Asada, but it was important that there not be a gap, that we carry that legacy, because before us, people had Asada is welcome here posters in their homes. Before us, people were raising, you know, they would call people the New York 10, and they would have campaigns to free Huey and free Angela, and free George. And so that was part of the tradition. So I'm so happy that we didn't have a gap in that.
And connected those things. The theme of Black August 2000 was no more prisons. And you know, popularizing that phrase on the stage was huge in the year 2000. You know, so the foundation for us to say defund police to dismantle prisons today was definitely seeded in that moment.
I love that. See, shout out to women. We just do everything, right? How do y'all think that I don't know, like the artists within hip hop or the parallels of hip hop can support Black August and the Black August benefit, and as well as, you know, the political prisoners that are just stuck.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Black August Hip Hop Project is that we did what we knew, right? We did our thing. And I think that each generation has to do that, right? It may be the Black August Hip Hop Project, but it may be something that we can't even think of. We couldn't have imagined social media in the way it is today, 20 years ago, right? So folks who have these tools, they'll create something with those tools to raise awareness and to free our political prisoners. And like I said, you know, before Dream got on, I was telling her we've been freeing them. You know, Baba Sekou is out. You know,
Baba Herman Bell. Did you say Herman is home?
Baba Herman Bell is home, and we're very close to bringing Baba Jalil Muntaqeen home. So, yeah, my thing is don't do what we did actually, because that's how we were so successful. Is that we didn't just like take the template from the 60s and 70s and then try to do it in the 90s and 2000s, right? We use our tools.
I mean, and right now, you know, right now we see that, not right now, this is a tradition in this country, is that protest is criminalized. So I think about Josh Williams in Ferguson protester, you know, has been in jail, you know, for not even 3 years, basically since Ferguson, since the uprising, you know, charged basically with protesting. I think they threw some arson charge on him. But, you know, he is a prisoner of, Baba Sekou, we used to follow the definition set forth by the international amnesty community around prisoner of war and political prisoner. But there's work still to be done now. People are being disappeared from the streets every day. Activists who are resisting the state, who are resisting state violence, who are standing up to state violence. And they're being disappeared in ways that are incredibly troubling. So, I mean, we used to deal with like the Jump Out Boys, basically, which is like Giuliani's task force. He used to have these, what were they called, Mo?
The Street Crimes Unit.
Yeah, the Street Crimes Unit. And they would just jump out of like Hondas with like big Long Island white boys with no identifying anything on, right? And just grab up, and grab up little, you know, young kids, right? And so the other thing that MXGM used to do, I mean, we did a lot of things, a lot of political education, clothing drives, but the other big kind of banner project that we had led by Jabril Touré, led by Jabril was, you know, Cop Watch. And it was, you know, following, you know, just driving around at 2 a.m. and like monitoring the police who were doing this kind of like incredibly unconstitutional, you know, conducting these unconstitutional, like basically stop and frisk on the streets. And of course, MXGM ended up successfully suing New York City for stop and frisk. So I think one of the things, because again, we didn't have social media, we weren't as good as claiming our wins, you know? And so back to the film, it's good to have like this document. So I'm so grateful to all the filmmakers who like contributed their footage to this. And then to, the people who helped me in the end put it together.
We're grateful to Dream for her magic.
Yes.
And to bring it all together.
Amazing. And I know we just have you for a few moments. So one of my last questions was, what inspired the artists? Like when you look at the different I guess like the flyers or the list that you have of the different artists, you know, you had Yasin Bey, most Def back then, you had Talib Kweli, you had Dead Prez, you had all these amazing artists. What was it about, I don't know, like working with these artists that made you all feel like, okay, they have to be here, like they have to be a part of it?
It was very organic. We were all neighbors and we were all in community. I mean, someone like Talib, for instance, he and Mose had bought his mother's bookstore in Brooklyn. You know, these were people that we knew. They were our peers. And so as we were getting our political education, we were, of course, sharing that political education. You know, when you see something like, I don't know, Blowout Comb, Diggable Planet's second album, talking about Sekou Odinga, it's because me and Ish were like hanging a lot back then. And I would be working on that campaign. So of course I'm talking to him about Sekou Odinga. And so then he embeds that into his album artwork, into his lyrics. Someone like Common is a very straightforward story of us taking him to Cuba, you know, sitting with the sister, with the Sada, and then coming back and writing basically you know, like a, what do you call it when you have the book where you're cheating when you don't read the thing? Cliff notes.
Oh, Cliff Notes. Yeah, Spark Notes, Cliff Notes. Yeah.
Yeah, basically that's, so his song for Sada is Cliff Notes to her autobiography. And so he made that record after we took him to Cuba, you know? And so that's the kind of work, by the way, that is in the tradition. First of all, like Winnie Mandela sat down with Harry Belafonte and with all these other people so that they could be ambassadors to get like a boycott, economic boycott, to get other people involved in what was, you know, in the questions, you know, of the day. And the questions of our day, you know, we actually got instructed to, you know, to take up this question of political prisoners in the US. And it was really like helpful because, you know, we were being trained by people who were internationalists, who were Pan-Africanists. So this question of like, you know, Cuba's sovereignty was one that we were able to talk about, and everyone wasn't on it, you know, on board. Like someone like Fat Joe, who was raised by like, you know, Latino, Caribbean, you know, family members, wasn't sure about where he should stand on Cuba. And so, you know, we had a tradition in hip hop of being in ciphers and like sharing knowledge and building with one another. And that's what we would do as a community. And so it was a lot of give and take, you know, and that's how those people ended up being like kind of partners with us in the Black August concert series.
Awesome. I love how happy y'all are when y'all think about this thing. This is amazing. I love it.
It's really great. I want to underscore what Dream said about the relationships. The relationships is the important part of organizing. And we didn't like filter out, like when you asked the question, like, did we go and pick and say, this artist? No, not you, this one. That really wasn't the process. Like people think that you went for the conscious artists. You know, we had artists like David Banner be a part of that because we knew him. You know what I'm saying? Same with Badu, because we knew her, you know, and when you're in relationships with people as community, like Dream said, you share that knowledge. What are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about what you're working on. What y'all working on? We're trying to make sure that Asada is not captured in Cuba because they just put a bounty on her head. Like, you know, these are the conversations we would have. And then those artists would be like, well, how can I help?
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, the very first Black August the very first fundraiser we did for political prisoners, it was for Matulu, it was for Dr. Matulu Shakur, and it was at the South Oxford Tennis Club. And Biggie, it wasn't for the concert series, but Biggie did a fundraiser for us. You know what I mean? Because me and him were hanging every day, and this is what I was talking about every day.
I love that.
Again, he was our neighbor. Me and Monifa lived on Cambridge Place, and Biggie lived on St. James, which is right around the corner. So we were literally neighbors. I think that Deb Prez and them lived a little farther in Flatbush, and Kweli ended up taking over my apartment on Clinton. I don't know, he just lived in this van with his chauffeur.
And members, Baye and Kari were like in that crew with Deb Prez.
Yeah, he could manage him. Yeah, so it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? It was just the 90s.
So that's the 90s.
I like this era though. I like this era. I'm not like romantic about that era. When we look back at our concerts, even then we would be like, yo, we are not doing a good job with gender balance. I'm so happy that what I've learned, not just like Monifa said earlier about self-care, because we really were on some like whatever that silly phrase is about no sleep, you die.
Like,
some dumb shit we were on.
Yeah, sleep till I'm dead. Sleep when I'm dead. Something like
Why
that.
did the wheels fall off?
Yeah. Yeah.
And absolutely, this generation queering up gender has been like a revelation for me, you know? So I don't, like, I look back at old things that I wrote back then, and I just am so happy that I have lived to grow and evolve. And no, hip hop has not been the framework for my organizing for almost 2 decades. So if I was to do something now, I'm so happy that there are people doing the Black August concert right now as a kind of like tribute to that memory, so that history doesn't get lost. But I don't look at hip hop artists as like vehicles for messages for me today. So.
And I think, no, I feel you. And I think for some people, I don't know, but I was saying earlier, like a lot of today's youth, and it's so weird because I'm of age. But anyway, when I think of like a lot of like younger artists and how they have, like younger fans of hip hop or pop music, rock, what have you. And they look to these artists as just whatever they say is the gospel. And it makes me think of like, you know, artists kind of using their platforms, not just only for good, but just to inform as well. It doesn't always have to be about, you know, your struggles. And you can use your storytelling skills to, you know, tell someone else's story. So,
but see, the thing is, even if they don't, we all have platforms now. So even if they don't, you don't even have to wait for your artist, you know what I mean, to say something. I mean, and when I think of this moment, and this particular moment, I mean, we've been in a millennial kind of movement moment since Oscar Grant was killed, right? But when I think about this last uprising in that is happening in simultaneously in a few places, but I'll just locate them as Louisville and Minneapolis, I saw artists come out and say all the wrong things, have to backtrack, and like we actually don't, you know. I wish that there was that connection to organizers. I wish they would take a beat, and there are some that do, you know. But I wish they would take a beat and say, I don't do this full time. Let me get a political education. Let me listen to what people on the ground in Louisville are saying. They may say, don't even come here. You know what I mean? Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We actually don't want you and your germs and your big organizations. They may say, you know, I mean, they're all, whatever the messaging is, you know, like it should come from the ground and from organizers. And so, I don't know. I don't need to be led by artists. And we didn't need it then, by the way. Hip hop, we looked at hip hop as a cultural tool to raise awareness about this particular issue. We were very focused. Black August wasn't about all the things that our community was facing. It was very particular and specific around political prisoners in the US. And then also this hybrid, this trip of like building international relationships in the Black radical tradition. So.
And I think, but before I wrap up this segment, I think that's amazing because, especially when I look at a lot of like the hip hop artists that are from Cuba, and seeing how they give credit to Asada, they give credit to Nyanda for helping them just helping them just get some new education in their lives. Like a lot of us didn't learn about any of these people in school, didn't learn about Black Wall Street or what have you. We didn't learn about those things in school. Like you learned it elsewhere, and you had to unlearn so much. And it's so cool to see just like, hip hop is worldwide, but it's I don't know, it's always been cool to me to kind of just like see it grow in Cuba. But
I know Monifa's going to talk more about that, but and I know Mo is going to talk about Pablo, who was like kind of our guide through Cuba. But I would also say that one of the things that was amazing about Cuba is like when I think about intergender hip hop groups, for instance, there was like two. It was like the Fugees and Digable Planets, right? I mean, in the 80s, there was always some woman in a group, right? But that's kind of seeded in the 90s. But then when we go to Cuba, it would be like two women and one guy. It would be like, there was just like the way that hip hop feels now with women leading. You definitely have like these amazing women groups in Cuba, and the politics was more like kind of, you know, upfront and radical. You know, it was deep. And then the other thing I would say, and I know you show footage of us in South Africa too, But the other thing I would say about Cuba in particular is not just that Nahanda and Asada were teaching like young Cubans, like they were having the experience that all of us have when we travel abroad, right? Like where you have to kind of, you run into people and they have an idea about America, and we have to talk to them about, just as Malcolm did, like the truth about America and the truth about what America does to Black people every day. And so, just like there are people in our own communities here in America who have never heard of Nahanda Abiodun or her case, and a lot of people haven't heard about Assata Shakur. Of course, Cubans didn't know who they were. They have respect for their elders, and they were like, this is like Mama Assata, Mama Nahanda, but their stories unfolded because they were part of the community. Assata at one point had a radio show. And was taking like karate, and Assata paints and does poetry, and Nahanda is like, I'm talking her in the present tense because I just miss her so much, but when she walked down the street, like everyone knew Nahanda.
Yeah,
a people person. When we would land, she would have all these places for us to go, whether it was jazz, whether it was like the restaurant in someone's house. She like knew the streets of Havana like the back of her hand. And so she wasn't always out there trying to educate. She was being herself and being in the community and just loving up on Black people like she was doing in Harlem,
That's amazing. I wish that any of those little ideas from Black Mirror were real, where you can just like share your memories like in full and kind of like watch them on TV and
but we have this
exactly
footage of us, of Nahanda being in a restaurant talking to us, that footage where she's talking to I think Deb Prez are there, and then I shot I met Deb Prez in fact when we in Assata's hotel room when I was shooting them. So all right, y'all, I gotta go.
Yeah,
I'm working on the Black National Convention, which I'm sure Monifa's talked about or will talk about, but that airs tomorrow at 7. Okay. And I hope that everyone tunes in. All right.
Yeah.
And Monifa, I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. That was amazing. And I know that we still have to talk about clip number 2. So let's hop on into it. So yeah, I guess like when you look back at that, I guess like that specific segment, like what were some of the thoughts that came to mind?
Yeah, I really like that segment because it starts off with Dhoruba bin Wahad. And one of the reasons why we really felt we could win, like we were full of energy and passion that we could free political prisoners, is because he won his release in the early 90s. So many of us, he was like the first person we met who was like, look, I was locked up because I was an activist in the Black Panther Party and they framed me, and I cleared myself, and I fought and I'm out. And it's so interesting because it was right around the same time that Mandela had come to New York, maybe a few years after. And so that clip where he talks about what's happening globally and making all those ties and those connections, and Kathleen talking and Assata talking, I just want to share that clip so if you can understand the energy that they were transferring to us, that you can do this. You can win Black liberation and you can free political prisoners. Look at us.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved the idea and the notion of international solidarity. I thought that was so amazing and so beautiful. And like I had said earlier, like hip hop is worldwide, but the movement is also worldwide. And we've seen that, especially throughout this pandemic. I don't know if it was because everyone needed to kind of like sit still with themselves, and the pandemic let us no choice but to do that. But you just saw, I guess this time around, when we lost Breonna Taylor, when we lost George Floyd, you just see kind of like the world everybody from all over the world just kind of speaking up, and it's something amazing to see. So I wanted to ask you, I think I want to say it was on Mumia's, I guess whoever kind of has or handles his Facebook page, he talked about the loss of Delbert Africa. And he said, losing him was like a historical library being burned down. And I don't know, I thought that was really just poignant. Even referring to earlier how I just wish kind of everything was like Black Mirror. But you know, the knowledge and the just everything that we've learned from these people, how do you think we can keep it going? How what are some other ways that we can kind of document the lives of these amazing people long after they're no longer here with us?
We're doing it now, and it's a rush. You know, Dream talked about we are having another virtual Black August concert on Sunday. And part of what people will see if they tune in are these interviews in between the acts of political prisoners. You know, we're going to hear from Jihad Mumit. We're going to hear from Sekou Odinga, not us talking about him like in the documentary. He's going to talk in the flesh, and he's going to tell a lot of that history. So it's just about document. We have to archive this. One of the things that was so eye-opening this year was at the funeral of John Lewis. And many people remember when former President Bill Clinton tried to take a dig at the Black liberation movement by saying that Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, had it wrong and John Lewis had it right. So here you have the epitome of like white supremacist privilege, where you're going to define for Black people who is right for us and who is wrong for us. And so always the state is going to choose who they're most comfortable with. And we praise and respect John Lewis, you know, to the 10th power. But there's no way you're going to tell me that Kwame Ture is not a critical part of our Black liberation struggle. And so, but we have to tell that story. It's not going to be in the history books. It's not going to be told by the political leaders because they're afraid of what Kwame Ture was talking about.
That's facts. And this is another clip, the third clip that we're going to show is from Asada, who has some very wise words to say here. So let's check it out.
They're not in prison because they're criminals. Criminals put them in prison. They're not in prison because of illegal acts. They're in prison because of illegal thoughts. And that illegal thought is freedom, is liberation, is social justice, is political justice, is economic justice. That was and is still what they are fighting for. I think that to not support and struggle for the liberation of political prisoners today, people who have been in prison 20, 30 years, is the equivalent of not supporting Harriet Tubman, is the equivalent of not supporting Frederick Douglass, because we are victimized by a different type of slavery. But don't forget, it's slavery.
Woo! Woo! I was thinking the same thing, like, whew. Every time I see that part.
Walk away, you know?
Exactly.
Clarity.
Absolutely.
And that's why, you know, when we bring artists there, they leave and they create entire songs, entire albums. I mean, she just comes with such clarity, you know, and with such, you know, sharp political analysis that if you went into the meeting confused, when you left, you were like, oh, okay, this is who I am. You know, I often meet people who say, I wonder what I would have done back in the day, back in the civil rights movement or back in the liberation movement. And I tell them, because this is what Asai would tell us, whatever you're doing today, that's what you would have been doing then. Because not everybody was at the March on Washington. Not everybody was the Black Panther Party. She's like, they hated the Black Panther Party. You know, lots of people, Black people, hated the Black Panther Party, right? So whatever you're doing right now, it's not the time, you know, it's you. And when she provides that clarity, you have to claim it. There is somebody in our midst who's doing what Harriet was doing. Are you supporting them? Are you flanking them? Or are you dragging them on?
Yeah. Are you being critical without any merit? Like, are you just saying things to say it? Like, I think supporting each other is the best thing that we can do. And being like, you can have the intention, but it helps to kind of like actually have some action and do the work behind it. And she is definitely like one of those people. So I really, really love that. So speaking of amazing women, we could jump into the fourth clip with the wonderful Nahanda. So let's check out that one.
When I first met Nahanda Abiodun, it was in Cuba, of course, where she has been spending her time with a lot of the comrades who we're honoring by doing Black August.
Her exile did not stop her struggle. And so she continued to educate people in the island of Cuba around our issues, so much so that, you know, she's been dubbed the godmother of Cuban hip hop. You know, whenever people come to Cuba, they know that one of the people they need to sit down with to talk to is, you know, Nahanda.
I have 32 counts against me, which includes mutilation of the scholarship. Okay? Expropriation, transporting arms, and monies across state line. I mean, like I said, it's 32 counts. A lot of them are interrelated. It is not enough for me to say that just my comrades helped me to be free so that I would not be captured. It was an effort by our whole community. Okay, it was a mixture. We being able to get here and not be captured of our people. And I say that because it's that people that helped me when I was under in the United States were just not quote unquote you African revolutionaries. There were grandmothers who did not even understand my line in terms of land and independence, but said to me, "You're doing something for Black people, and I gotta help you." Okay, so I think when you talk about what can be done, is that the unity of our people is what's going to keep, first of all, me from being captured by the United States, and also eventually being unified and talking about political prisons is going to get them out of it. Because as it stands right now, the only way they're going to come out of it is that we have a mass movement among not just our people, but a mass movement among the rest of the people, or we're just going to get them out.
Right.
Okay? Okay. Now, I'm down with whatever got to be done.
When I first met Nahanda,
still down.
Yes.
Whatever has to be done. Like that was one of my favorite parts of the documentary, because it made me think, you know, what a mass movement can look like today. Mm-hmm. And it's like I said earlier, like I'm very optimistic, but at the same time, I think about, you know, everyone kind of fighting for the mic. You know, and I would hope that a movement is everybody kind of being like, okay, well, I'm an educator. I can lend this. I can grow crops. I can do this. I can do that. Everyone kind of like tapping into their talents and kind of really working together. So for you, I have two questions. What does, in your mind, what does a mass movement look like? And what are some notions we can take away from what Nahanda has just said, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Because Nahanda said that everyday people helped her to stay free. And a lot of people don't know the whole timeline with Nahanda, but you think about this. With Assata, from the time she was freed from prison to where she showed up in Cuba, there's 5 years there. She was underground all over the place. People literally had signs, you know, that they would just hang everywhere to throw the police off that says, Assata is welcome here. So she was being hid by grandmothers, by restaurant workers, by transit workers. And a mass movement looks like when it's not just siloed to the activists and the academics who are tied into a political ideology, but when you have everyday people down, like she said in the end, for whatever, because they know this is a moment where we're about to gain some freedom, where we're going to get closer to our liberation. And it's like all hands on deck. And what I saw today that resembled that happened in the wake of the George Floyd murders. We were having mass demonstrations here. You know, you're in Brooklyn day after day after day, and the police repression was brutal. It was relentless. And I'll never forget one day when the bus drivers, the transit union, said that they refused to transport people who were arrested, protesters, to jail. They refused to let their buses, they refused to let the B-25 and the B-44 and the B-48. And then they said, and if you're unclear about what's happening, we're going to put out a tweet. I saved that TWU tweet. They said, we are here to transport the working people of New York and not to rob people of their civil right to protest. Those were the bus drivers. They're not in the Malcolm X grassroots movement. They're not members of the movement for Black Lives. And that's when it was easy to say, we have a mass movement.
And I love that. And it's just a perfect segue. Perfect segue into another clip with Nahanda. So let's check it out.
Yo, tell me how it sounds. Fresher than Tony Rebels, vegetables at African street festivals were incredible. Women is plentiful. Over the years I met a few. None of them compared to you, preparing you to make food bearable. Something terrible. Let's see.
When I went to Cuba with MXG in 1999, it was life changing. It was inspirational. It was something that I felt very privileged and blessed to do as a young Black man from America, hip hop artist, to be able to have that experience. It was, it was enriching in ways that I couldn't even imagine.
Cuba was beautiful. It was mad, love there, mad struggle, young people, seizing control, bringing hip hop right up in the national forefront of Cuba. That was mad real. It was like tangible. I give thanks for Black August because that was an education, and I wouldn't have had it if MXG ain't organized. You know what I mean? So they definitely doing good work for the community, because helping us have international links. You know what I mean? Which is key to international power.
Since the 1970s, Cuba has been a haven for Black political prisoners. Cuba has represented what's possible for being an ally to Black liberation struggles across the diaspora. Cuba has really been a safe home for many African bodies throughout the globe.
Sí, ¿cómo que no? Ahí están. Come on, y'all clap and what? Just clap, come on, y'all, and clap and what? Just clap and what? Rap stuff that goes down in Havana. What can I do? Yo, I smoke Dunky Banner. Came down to get down. Plus I spit sounds. This is what I'm coming. My people lost and found in this place that they call from the space.
The two sisters that put out the call, Nahanda Abiodun and Sada Shakur, two significant sisters, both personally as well as in terms of the movement. Nahanda is a former member of the Republican of Africa, a member of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, who has been doing significant human rights work for all of her adult life.
Nahanda Abiodun was walking down 125th Street when she found out about the raids and that the comrades were being swooped up. She stood there and turned around and walked down those subway steps and went underground. And she was a Black woman. She was not a wealthy woman, but she was able to find her way from the A train at 125th Street safely to the beaches of Havana, Cuba. And there was a whole system in place that, of course, helped her do that. But that takes a phenomenal person. That takes a very brave and cunning person. And knowing the story and being able to just sit, chill, and hang out with her helped us to realize that we can do anything.
When I first met Nahanda Abiodun, it was in Cuba, of course, where she has been spending her time with a lot of the comrades who we're honoring by doing Black August.
Awesome. So before we jump into the last clip, I just want to, for this one, what were some of the lessons that you learned from Nahanda back then that still apply to you now?
Yeah, the Black August tradition actually started in the prison. Like it was a commemoration specifically of George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, and Katari Golden. And she talked about them a lot. And she wanted to impress upon us that all of our people deserve to be free. So we kind of had this classification, we had these political prisoners, but technically George and Katari weren't political prisoners. George Jackson had a 1 year to life sentence for a $70 robbery as a kid. So because the system systemically criminalized us, we are kind of like all political prisoners. And I took that from her. And also just how she's a phenomenal woman. you know, that a working class Black woman from Harlem who's an organizer, she doesn't have a private plane, was able to go under the ground and make sure that she remains safe and free, made me feel like I could do anything.
I love that. See, I felt the same way when I was watching. I was like,
yeah, right?
This is amazing. This is, I
You're like,
love
what
that.
am I doing with my life? Oh, I could do
right.
anything.
Like, I need the strength. Like that's real inspiration. And I had a former colleague, actually, she created a documentary and it was called Cuban hip hop iconicity for Vibe magazine, and she actually got to speak with her. And it's when I watched that, and when I read a lot of she had like a feature to go with it. Her name is Marjo Estevez, so check her out. She's quite amazing. But yeah, when I read the feature that went with it, I was just like, this woman is amazing. Like, I need to learn more about her. How can I do that? How can I lend my voice to the movement? How can I, like I said earlier, like use like my talent to help, like be a part of a team, not just a solo mission.
Yeah.
Like, it really.
And remember, she was a health worker. Like Nahanda's work was detoxing members of our community who were suffering from substance abuse. She worked with Mutulu Shakur. They used acupuncture, they used natural medicine, and they were saving people's lives in the community.
I love that.
So you can, whatever it is that you do, it can be activism. Whether you're a teacher, a health worker, or you're on the street doing cop watch. Not everyone has to do cop watch, right? It could be creating films and writing. Whatever it is that you do, you are a bus driver who's a part of a union who knows you can shut down people from going to jail. That's all activism. Like, that's all Asada work.
Exactly. And this last clip that we're going to get into kind of just puts a bow on this. It makes me think about all the amazing women. It makes me think about you. It makes me think about Dream, like people that were really a part of this movement. So let's check it out.
Historically, the Black liberation movement, and actually all movements, let's be honest, have fallen short of trying to incorporate the role of women, what women mean, and how we incorporate anti-sexist work into that, anti-sexist theory and anti-sexist work in our general liberation movement. And when the woman that we put on a poster every single year, Asada Shakur, is someone that these artists revere and talk about, but they're somehow unable to see an Asada Shakur in the woman that they're dating. That's a painful realization.
Yes. Yeah. That's my sister Meron, another one of my very dear friends, one of my best friends, and she hit the nail on the head. You know, people are not able to see the Asada in all of the Black women that they interact with in the street, that they're dating, in their families. And so we had a long way to go, but in this moment we say it's not just the icon Black women every day are fighting for freedom. The Black woman that serves the food at your lunch in your cafeteria that you get your lunch for, or who helps the kids cross the street, or who is your doctor, you know, and that we have to tear down the system of oppression, not halfway, but fully. And so for us, racism and sexism is where we squarely sit. We sit in that intersection. So if you're only talking about liberating one half of me, I'm still not free. We need the brothers to recognize that, and the sisters, and talk about our liberation struggle in an intersectional way. So, you know, shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw, shout out to Brittany Cooper, shout out to Charlotte Brothers, you know, shout out to all of the many current, contemporary, and historic Black feminists. Shout out to Angela Davis for giving us this framework. We struggle with it, but it's the only way we're going to get free.
Yeah, and we have amazing teachers to learn from, and I think today, like you said, like it's not just like protect Black women doesn't mean, you know, protect the famous ones, protect the people that you read about in your magazines or your websites or whatever. It's your sister, it's your mother, it's your girlfriend, it's your wife. Yeah, it's your neighbor. It's all
not
of
just
that.
cis women, it's Black trans women.
Yeah, Black trans women. Yeah, it's people from the LGBTQ community. It's my family. It's your family, and I think that that's what we have to do. We really have to keep going. Even a comment: Black women every day are getting pregnant. Yeah, we are like, and we're trying. And I see, you know, as somebody that works in music journalism, like I see, you know, I see people like No Name just like get the brunt of it literally every day. This amazing artist from Chicago who has put out and has done the work for years. And, you know, it's so crazy how powerful we are, because her tweets are just so simple and the truth, and they get people so upset. And it's almost just ridiculous to me. And I think of Megan Thee Stallion, and I think of a Cardi B with WAP, and a song about being liberated has made people so upset. It's just amazing to see like how powerful we are and how we really do need to be protected.
We do. And, you know, a moment of clarity for me was when I visited the home of Frederick Douglass in Washington, D.C. I can't even remember why we were on this trip. It was like one of those tours of D.C. And then we come across a beautiful home. I mean, basically, Frederick Douglass, by the time he passed away, was like a wealthy man. He was well-known abolitionist, had done so much work. He died in his home on his way to a lecture, but they said the honorarium was something like $2,000. And I forget what that is in today's money. It's crazy. It's
yeah, I bet.
And I had to pause for a second because I had recently been on a trip where I saw Harriet Tubman's last home, and where she spent her last days, which is essentially a shack in upstate New York, where she died in poverty, where she did not, you know, she couldn't even get her pension from being an actual member in the Union Army leading raids. And it's just this, but she was as powerful an abolitionist on the ground in ways that Frederick Douglass wasn't, not taking anything away from his work, but the fact that their last days were so drastically different says everything about how we value in our liberation struggles the work of women versus the work of men. And we have to shut that down right now. We can't leave those examples and those models in place for our daughters.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something that everyone should take away from this whole conversation right now. And in addition to the awesome documentary. But yeah, before we wrap up, do you have any like last minute words or anything you would like to share?
To everybody who's listening, to everybody who's watching, please join the Movement for Black Lives tomorrow at the Black National Convention. I mean, we're taking so many cues from our elders from the 60s and 70s and just building on it. We are on fire. You know, Black August really came out of the assassination of George Jackson, which happened in 1971 in California. And that next year in 1972 was a historic Black National Convention in Gary, Indiana. And our plan before COVID was to recreate that Black National Convention again. It was going to be in Detroit. We were going to have tens and thousands of Black people coming in from every state in the United States to proclaim that we want to defund the police and liberate Black folks and end mass incarceration and ratify our political platform. And we were going to be an answer to the DNC and the RNC that's still going on to say, that's not enough. We already knew it was
that ain't it.
And now we have moved that to the tools that we have, which is to a virtual space. So I definitely want people to check out blacknovember.org, go on, register. Everybody can attend the Black National Convention. You're going to hear from some people that were in the documentary during that. You're going to hear from people who we talk about who are actually incarcerated, who are behind the walls, who are free now. People who freed Assata Shakur from, I don't want to give too much away, but definitely tune into the Black National Convention. And then on Sunday, check out the Black August Hip Hop Project. We're back.
I was trying to find the number, but I don't want to say the wrong number. But you can also sign up for text updates, right, from the Movement for Black Lives too. I can't get the number, but if you go to the website, if you follow them on social media, like you'll have it. You'll have everything that you need to know. So yeah,
the first thing that pops up when I open this. because it's like 9 something. No, something else came up.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely go to m4bl.org. That's m4bl.org, where you will see how you can get our texts or our emails. But even if you go to that blacknovember.org, you'll see it there too. It's how you text to sign up. So, you know, it's nothing that you're doing now. All of the beautiful Black people that are out there, nothing that you're doing now is not essential, not important to our liberation struggle. You know, if you teach kids, if you run a daycare center, you're a babysitter, like these are all of the people that we needed when we had a mass movement. And that's what's coming into formation today.
Absolutely.
And we pulled up the website. That's it right
the website
there.
is here. I see it. It's right here. Well, it was there, but you know, you'll know where to go. We will send you all the information that you need to know. Again, thank you, Monifa. This is an amazing conversation. And to those who haven't seen the documentary, check out, I have the link in my bio on Instagram. My Instagram is Desiree Renee, Desiree_Renee. The link is right there. You can watch it, you can get informed, and you can also just get with the movement, man.
Get with it. I want to quickly shout out the Caribbean Cultural Center, though, before we sign off. Because many of us that went on that first trip to Cuba, like went to not the Black August trip, but like the World Youth Festival when we were kids.
Yeah.
We were already trained by the Caribbean Cultural Center that our culture is a weapon. We were taught that by Dr. Marta Moreno Vega before we even met Asada and Nahanda. So it's really important, these building blocks. So it just clicked. Everything clicked. It's like, what are we going to use? Well, Dr. Marta says our culture is our weapon. And we need to free political prisoners. And there's Black August. And that's how young people put all the pieces together. So thank you so much to the Caribbean Cultural Center for laying that foundation as well.
Yes, many, many thanks. Enjoy your night. Stay safe, everybody. And yeah, peace and blessings to y'all. Have a good night.